Anti-ICE protesters disrupted worship in a Minnesota church. Here's why the First Amendment doesn't protect their actions. Anti-ICE protest during church service where ICE official is pastor. Was this incident merely an instance of using your First Amendment right of free speech, or was it an infringement on other people's First Amendment right to worship? So, let's talk about it. Shall not suffer a witch to live. In the Salem witch trials, 14 young women were hung by the neck until death. But why didn't these witches save themselves? Because it wasn't a witch hunt, but a perversion of justice backed by biblical ideology. Martin Luther King Jr. was also the victim of a witch hunt of his own. King was imprisoned in the Birmingham City Jail for protesting the unfair restraints of segregation. Several clergymen wrote a letter condemning him and his practices of direct action. King, a pastor himself, could not sit in silence and imprisonment. So he wrote a letter justifying his measures through the same lens that was used to accuse him. But instead of pointing his fingers to his accusers and calling for their metaphorical hanging, King pointed his finger to the Word of God. The issue with decisive language is that it is very black and white. Whether you believe that Don Lemon and the protesters were right or wrong, your opinion is likely based on a firmly held set of beliefs. Immigration, like many other hot-button issues, is not typically one that is considered a gray area.
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus.
Yes.
That's why we're here.
Yes.
Okay, that's why we're here.
Okay.
That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship.
Yeah.
We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
After watching this video, some people are praising the pastor for looking out for the well-being of his flock, while others are condemning the church for staying silent while families are being forcibly separated. King, too, faced critics, but instead of condemning them with a harsh retort, he rewords his retort into a sermon, not condemning, but educating. He quotes, "Yes, these questions are still in my mind. In deep disappointment, I have wept over the laxity of the church, but be assured that my tears have been tears of love. There can be no deep disappointment where there is not deep love." He assures the church leaders that he is crying, but he is crying because of the love that he has for the church. He wishes for the church to do better. Where once a church was powerful, where Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed, King states that he fears the church will become nothing more than an irrelevant social club. He pleads not only with the clergy members who have condemned his actions, but with the world at large. He does not wish for there to be a separation among the races, and he warns that the minority youth that has been excluded will turn to extremist ideologies that take them further from the ideal America and further from the grace of God. This, in essence, is what is occurring in America today. We have a church that is largely ineffectual to the outsider's perspective. When SNAP food benefits were cut in November, a lot of the online discourse centered around the idea that the church should do more in this time of need for so many. If we are going to be holy people, then why are we going to extraordinary lengths to perform miracles? That in itself is a question that is unfair. Churches, like every organization, depend upon money from its followers or from its partakers to enact change, and churches already do so much. They raise for local needs, they host dinners and suppers for the community, they host vacation Bible schools, which often help working parents and provide food to needy children in the summertime. This is largely done through tithing of the members. But if you've been in a church any time in the past few years, then you will notice that attendance is not what it once was. The attendance of our youth is not what is being reflected today. How are we to feed the many if we are only so few? What occurred in this church on Sunday is just another example of the disconnect between the church and the world. The world rightly says, "Why aren't you caring about this issue?" While the church says, "Well, I'm just following the letter of the law." But what is the law? The name Martin Luther King is largely synonymous with the word freedom, but the man himself would likely have pointed the origin to that word heavenward. King, despite the verbal castigation that he received from his white brothers of the cloth, did not immediately denounce them with harsh language. Instead, King uses the word disappointment. Like a child who has caused his father pain instead of anger, King reclassifies that word. King reclassifies the argument used against him. He quotes, "If I sought to answer all the criticisms that crossed my desk, my secretaries would have little time for anything other than such correspondence in the course of the day, and I would have no time for constructive work." This statement right here is as close as King gets to demeaning the words of his fellow clergymen. However, this quote can be easily passed on as not another outright dismissal of their ideology, but a reminder that he should be focused and they should be focused on heavenly work, godly work. If this were to happen in my church, I'm uncertain as to what I would have done. With everything being online nowadays, do I really want my church and the people in it to be transformed into just another stage for public scrutiny? Was there a way perhaps to integrate these people into the church service? Well, that's hard to do when protesting involves shouting. Who were the protesters trying to convince? The people in the church or those watching online? The civil rights sit-ins and boycotts were not about being the loudest voice in the room, but about carving out a place for them that had been too long denied. But God has room for everyone. Would this protest have been more effective had they tried to have a conversation with the people that were in the church? Could they have had a healthy dialogue with the preacher? Perhaps been a guest speaker in a Bible study? What was the goal? To effect change or to go viral? In the Bible, taxpayers were known to be the lowest of the low. So when one approaches Jesus and they tell him that he needs to pay tax, Jesus performs a miracle. A fish comes from the sea and he takes a coin out of its mouth and he says, "Here, give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and give unto God the things that are God's." Now, this phrase has largely been used by Christians in the right to say that, yes, as Christians, we should follow the law. King also speaks at length about the connection between biblical ideals and man-made laws. Do you follow a law when it is not in line with biblical ideals? Well, the right answer should be no. But how do you discern the difference? The wisdom to know the difference comes from reading and studying the Bible. God was creating the earth. He worked 6 days and rested the seventh. But it seems to me that a lot of us have our minds on break 7 days a week. Our hearts and minds do not stay refreshed on the Lord through biblical study, reading, Bible study, church attendance, biblical entertainment, Christian conversation. We are not staying refreshed in the Lord. If we are not in the Word ourselves, how are we ever to know what the true will of the Lord is? Thank you guys for coming for another video. If you like this one, please give it a like. And if you want to see more, please subscribe. It means a lot to me. New video up next week where we talk about the Christian lie of magical timing.